I'm Jim Sethna, and I'm a professor of physics at Cornell University.
And so, Jim, I understand that you and your research team have been working on a new project about, well, science itself. Is that right?
It's why science works. It's why mathematics is able to describe the real world, and why that description is comprehensible to ordinary human beings.
So that's an interesting question. I've often wondered that myself. And tell me what you found. I mean, why is that the case? Why is it the case that we can use mathematics to describe things that we see in the world?
Well, in physics, it's been long known that you have this concept of emergence, that you have very complicated underlying theories, but they become simple when you're looking at emergent behavior, at things that happen on long length of time scales.
Give me an instance.
So Einstein's theory of relativity, if you had to guess it in order to make predictions about the real world, it would have been hopeless for Newton. But Newton was able to come up with a theory that worked and was self-consistent and made sense, that turned out to be an approximation to a more complicated underlying theory.
So wait, what you're saying is that the laws of physics as Newton understood them and as we teach them to students aren't right somehow?
They are correct, but they're emergent from a more complicated underlying theory.
Tell me more about what you mean by they're emergent from a more complicated underlying theory.
The air that allows me to talk and you to listen is filled up with all kinds of molecules that are colliding with one another.
Okay.
And those collisions are mediating the sound that comes from my mouth to your ear.
Okay.
And the laws of sound are much simpler than they have any right to be. All these complicated collisions end up leading to something that you can describe with simple equations and something that you can make use of to transmit sound.
Okay, and so what you've been doing recently is trying to understand why that's the case, why complex behavior can be described by
We've known that forever in physics.
Okay.
For sound, we have continuum limits. For high energy physics, where we don't need to understand string theory to explain the way light works. We have renormalization theory and renormalization groups, and
what's that?
And what
I never heard of that renormalization theory.
So the way light works, we're able to guess without understanding other things, because it turns out that light could work the same way with lots of different microscopic models. But let me emphasize, what I'm interested in explaining is not why physics works, but how economics and the social sciences and systems biology work the same way, even though we don't understand it in this controlled fashion.
Okay, so I think I have my arms around the physics thing, that it's the case that very complex systems can be described by relatively simple mathematics. Make the connection to me then from that to social sciences and economics.
So what we've discovered is that when you have a complicated model of how the cell works, or a complicated model of how the economy works, that the behavior of the model is often largely independent of the details of the model.
Okay.
And we understand that by checking. We take the model and we look at how its behavior changes as you change the rules, and we discover that you can change the rules an enormous amount, and the behavior that emerges is the same.
Okay.
And by understanding the mathematical structures in a certain way, we can explain why so many different models of the way the economy works give roughly the same predictions, or why many different climate models with very different rules on side all predict the same kind of global warming.
Well, so that's interesting to me for a couple of reasons. First of which, what you're telling me is that there's models in which you can go in and change a bunch of the guts of how the model works and the answer still comes out. That sounds to me like a bad or broken model that has something wrong with it. Because if you can change so many things and still get the same answer, it seems like the things you're changing are superfluous or don't work right.
Well, the same thing is true of physics. Einstein has the right theory of gravity, but there are an enormous number of other alternative theories of gravity which share some features of Einstein's theory but have lots of details different, and they will all give the same answers for how apples fall on Newton's head.
Okay.
And that's the reason that Newton is able to do science without understanding Einstein.
So you have been able then to quantify or to measure the degree to which one can monkey with the model and still get the same answer?
And we've been doing that for some time, but what's really new is we can use the same techniques that we've been using in biology. We've now gone back and analyzed the physics models. And the physics models, we call these sloppy models because they don't depend on all the details. There are lots of things you can change without changing the behavior. And physics models are sloppy in exactly the same way.
So tell me, Jim, what this means. You mentioned both models of the economy and models of the global climate, both of which seem to me like things that we're not particularly good at predicting. How does what you've figured out help us model either of those two systems better?
So I should be cautious. We've spent most of our time studying systems biology models. We've done a few models of things like high energy accelerators and insect flight. We've not actually implemented our tools on either macroeconomics or climate science. But if our tools work in those fields, we should be able to compare models and try to figure out what is missing from this family of models and the real behavior and quantify when you're just fiddling with details that don't really matter, when your prediction space looks the same, and when you're striking at the core of the problems of a model and allowing it to predict genuinely new things. That's the hope of looking at the mathematical geometry underneath might give us new insights on how to build better models.
So what you're developing is a tool to measure models and how well they work, is that right? Exactly.
What my long-term interest is to really capture the collective behavior of otherwise models that are too complicated for us to understand, to develop. One of my students has just developed a general purpose tool for simplifying models, for taking a complicated model and distilling a smaller model that has the same predictions.
Interesting. So I just want to touch for one more second there, Jim, on that. You keep mentioning, we've talked a couple of times about the climate model question. And it's always struck me that it seems to me like that's essentially an impossible thing to model accurately because there are so many variables that going into it. But more importantly, because there's no real way to test it because we only have one of them. You know what I mean? Can we ever believe a numerical model that we make about a thing that you can never verify in any way? Because there's only one real system.
We have lots of models of cosmology, and we only have one universe. We're in some ways much more fortunate. There are lots of planets out there we could predict their weather. And in fact, there's a major series of people, but that's not my field. I'd like to be able to say, many of my colleagues are skeptical that if you have a model and there are 6 things in it that you really don't understand deeply, how can you ever trust its results? And what we find is in systems biology, where we have much less quantitative understanding than we do about climate, Systems biology works because they can make up models where they don't really have a clue about a lot of things that are going on. Lots of proteins are undescribed. Lots of important parts of a given, it's called the signal transduction network, the signaling that the cell uses to communicate between different parts. Lots of those things are not very well understood, and yet people can build models that are quite useful and give you predictions and allow you to design drugs, design therapies, and if they can do it in systems biology, we should be able to use the same kinds of tools to see if our uncertainties about climate really warrant our level of anxiety about their predictivity.
All right. Well, thanks very much for sitting down, Jim. I appreciate it. Give Jim a round of applause. You want another one before we watch?
Yeah.